Let's begin. We are on Daf Lamed Beis, Amud Beis. We're on page 32b, and we're learning about the Hadas. After Lulav, we finished learning about Lulav. Now we're learning about Hadas, the myrtle, and the Hadas. We learned a few laws that were similar to Lulav. Number one, the Yavesh and the Gozul, the laws if it's stolen, if it's dried out. So that's Puzzle, Ashera, Ironidachas. These
I
cases
apologize
similar,
in the middle, but
similar to the cases with Lulav, they're also invalid. And then we talked about Niktam Roishoi. We did mention that a little discussion here because the Mishnah here says that Niktam is if it's clipped, it's puzzle, it's invalid. But we all know that there seems to be some leniency about a hadas having to do with the fact that the leaves grow and cover the top. So therefore, even though the Mishnah says it's puzzle, it's invalid if the top is clipped off. There must be another opinion, which we'll see later, and we'll be discussing. So, but the Mishnah here does say that it is invalid. If the top is clipped off, it's invalid. The Mishnah also talks about nifritzu alav, the leaves fell off. If it has these little grapes that it grows, there's a berry that it grows on it. So if it has more berries than leaves, that's invalid. If you take them off, it's valid, but you can't take them off on Yom Tov. That was the Mishnah. The Gemara had said, well, the Gemara talked about how we know that it's a hadas. How do we know what the Torah means a hadas? The Torah doesn't really say the word hadas. The Torah says the word anaf eitz avos, and it's a little vague. It's a anaf. Anaf normally means a branch. Eights of a tree, avos braided. Well, how do you translate those words? A branch of a tree that braided. So the chachamim. Well, I mean, we have a tradition. We know what the Torah means, but how does it fit in the words? And how do you see it? How did the Torah hint to us that it means specifically a hadas? Is there any hint in the Torah that it specifically means hadas? And of course, if Hashem chose those words to use, so the Gemara has these insights into the actual wording, and one of them is anaf eitz avos means that the shoots, which is the leaves, are the tree, meaning it's all about the shoots. It's all about the leaves, not about the stem. It's the anaf eitz. The tree is just anaf, is just these leaves. So it's basically covering the tree, and that's the first point. But then it says it also has to be avos, because otherwise maybe an olive tree. Also, the leaves, and I don't know what an olive tree looks like, but the leaves cover the. It seems that the leaves of an olive tree also cover the branches. So the Gemara said no, but it also has to be avos. Avos means braided, and when it says braided, what does it mean to add to this? So the first point is that there are enough leaves that cover the stem. And then braided means, well, when you braid, you have the two braids coming that they sort of like fold over each other. They are three braids, they fold over each other, which means they overlap. And the overlapping seems to be on each juncture. The three leaves that are there, they're not just covering the stem, they actually overlap each other. In addition to that, there's overlapping the ones below it and the ones above it. So the Gemara says that maybe a dulva should be okay. Dulva, which we translated as armon chestnut. That's the way Rashi translates it. So the chestnut tree, and again, I don't know what the chestnut tree looks like. Although years ago in Rhode Island, we did have chestnuts trees there. I don't know. You have in Boston chestnut trees, but I can't remember what the leaves look like. But somehow the leaves of a chestnut tree are they are considered avos. They would be considered that they somehow are braided. If only we could have a picture of it in front of us. But somehow the chestnut tree, they're braided. It looks like a braid. So on that, the Gemara says, yeah, they're braided, but they do not cover the entire stem. They're not ritzufais lechasis koletzos. So they're not on top of they're not covering. I'm guessing that it's similar to a hadas, that they might they cover where the leaves are, they cover the stem, but there's areas where there's no leaves, there's no junctures, bases of where the leaves come out from, and there isn't you don't have the anaf eights, you don't have the leaves covering the entire stem, and so therefore it can't be a chestnut. In other words, if not for that, we might have used a chestnut for our daled minim, chestnut branch. But the Gemara says it can't be that because it says avos, except because it says anaf eitz. And anaf eitz means that it has to be the entire, the branch has to be covered completely with leaves. So, so the Gemara then says, well, what about hirduf? And hirduf seems to fit all problems. This hirduf, it's seems to be braided, and I guess its leaves cover the stem. And on that, the Gemara says either because of it has pricklies, so there it's deracha darchinoyam. Hashem would not have chosen that. It's Hashem's ways are ways of peace and the pleasantness. And the Rava says that it has to do with the fact that it's poisonous to animals, and therefore it would be it wouldn't fit within the category of emes v'ashalom ehavu, that you should love truth and peace, and this would not fall. This would not be considered that, and it's not emes, not shalom, made for poison. Therefore, we would not assume that was what the Torah meant, and that's what Hashem meant. Rather, it must be the hadas. Okay, so that was the Gemara's discussion. Then the Gemara brought another brisa, and the other brisa says, also mentions about this kalua, that kalua means it's braided. And so it says over there that it has to be similar to a chain. That's what a hadas is. It has to be braided similar to a chain. Now the braid, seemingly the chain has 2 points to it. Number one, the way a chain is, the way a chain is made is from a thick metal, and it's braided. And additionally, you have one ring and then another ring under it. So it's braided means it covers over, one covers over the other. They don't just, so they're overlapping. And I'm not sure if it only is emphasizing the overlapping of top to bottom. I'm thinking that it might also include overlapping from the right to the left, meaning on the sides, although it doesn't say it clearly, but just a thought. I don't know if the Steinsaltz has anything on that, but the overlapping, the simple understanding of shalshelis, I guess, is the top to bottom, that it's overlapping. So the rabbi said it meant this type of braid, that it's so that's how it's supposed to be. This is the hadas. And Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says the branch has to be similar, even though the wording in the Gemara says period, to its fruit. It has to be the stem has to be similar to its fruit, or the trunk has to be similar to its fruit. But the way it translates it, the way the Ritva has the girsa, it's eitzoi 1 second. The other way of wording it, let me just see on the side here. My electricity is having some problems. My lights are off. But on the side, we saw the other girsa. Oh, my lights came back. On the side, the Gemara says, "Enough of chayfin as eitzai." Oh, well, there's two ways of reading it. Tam eitzai va enough of shavet. That it's branch. One way is that it's branch and its leaves are equal. That's one way of reading it. In other words, the other version of this was the eitzai, not upirioi, but it's eitzai va'anafav. So the stem and the leaves have a similar taste. I don't know who would want to taste it, but that's what it says. The other thing is that the other girsa is that it's enough of chayfines eitzai, that the leaves cover the stem. So anyway, these are two points. These are a few points about the hadas, how it specifically has to be, and that's how we know that it means it. Yes, Mordechai.
Yeah, during Sukkot, I like to tell these Arba meaning jokes that I made up, and one of them is, what do you call a company that sells hadassim? Myrtle Incorporated.
Uh-huh.
There was this crime family called Murder Incorporated.
Oh. Okay. So the brisa here, it brought the concept of kaliyah that has to be braided like a chain, and it brought this concept of either that it covers the stem or that the taste and of the leaf and the stem is equal. So that's like a new thing, a new point. We didn't have that earlier in the previous brisa. The tam eitzoi va'anof of shavet. That's one of the enough of that. This is from the Rif, the Rush, and the Rush. They have tam eitzoi va'anof of shavet. The stem and the leaves have the same taste. Okay. Anyway, so this is that second brisa, and Havayomer Zahadas, and the brisa concludes and says this. It must be that is the hadas. Okay, and then the Gemara said that eight avos, if it has to be braided, it's kosher. If it's not braided, it's not kosher. And how is that so? What does it mean, braided? So Gemara says it means there's 3 on every juncture. So here, the concept of braided seems to be emphasizing that it's overlapping, not in a chain-like style. In other words, with one ring on top and one ring on the bottom. Here, it seems to be emphasizing that they have to be coming out of the same juncture. That's what it seems to be emphasizing here, that they are avos, that this braid is that it's overlapping on its horizontal overlapping. Now, that's what it seems to be saying. That's the way I understand it, unless you understand it differently. But this is what it's saying, that it has to be 3 coming out of 1, and the Gemara says that tlasa tarfi bekina. So it's 3 leaves out of 1 juncture. Rav Kana Amar. Rav Kana says afilu trei v'chad, even 2 coming out of 1 juncture. V'chad, and there's 1 that's under it, and it goes up and it overlaps on the 2. So even if it's 1 below, it's 2 and then 1 below, but it overlaps on the 2, that's also kosher. Rav Acha Breidu Rava Mahadra Trei V'chad. Rav Acha Breidu Rava would specifically go for that 2 with 1 below that overlaps. Hoyel v'nafik mikumein de Rav Kahana, since it came out of Rav Kahana that this is kosher, he would go after that. And even though, of course, 3 is kosher, if we have all three coming out, but he would make sure to go and try to get that. This is a famous Gemara where it shows how like the students would love to follow their teacher even on his leniencies, even though you could say, well, let me be strict, I'll follow all the opinions. But there seems to have been a concept of, if my Rav says this is kosher, I specifically want to, want to follow it. Now, the only thing you have to know where that applies, because there's a lot of cases where someone allows something only in a case of b'diavad. Like, for example, Cholav Yisrael, milk by a non-Jew. Like, there seems to be a big question about milk that it's not Cholav Yisrael. So there is a leniency. Moshe Feinstein had a leniency about milk. Someone wrote to him about a case where someone can't get Cholav Yisrael milk, and they need milk for their children, their child. One of them needed milk to be healthy. So Moshe made a heter. So that heter, all of a sudden, it became a whole religion of its own. And everyone seems to think that you're allowed to have milk that's not being watched by a yid, as long as that farm doesn't have pigs. You can rely on the government, and it's good enough. That's a very that's a leniency where people are just taking the leniency further than necessarily where it was meant for. You live in a place where there's Cholav Yisrael milk. Imagine in New York, Cholav Yisrael milk in every. It's almost hard to find non-Cholav Yisrael milk. So there, so the question is, here he was. The story is that if Kahana held this is a kosher, this is a perfect hadas. This fits the bill. So in this case, Ravacha, Rava, he would specifically go and follow and get one that was the ones that Rav Kahana said were kosher. In other words, he didn't hold that the three that it's avos means three. Avos means 2 and 1. That's the way he understood it. Now the Gemara continues and said, then the Gemara says that Mar bar Ameimar told Rav Ashi that his father Ameimar used to call that type of hadas a hadas shoita. It was called a hadas that's not exactly kosher hadas. It's not kosher. It's called a hadas that's a fool. It's a shoita. Why is it called a fool? So we said yesterday that it's maybe looks similar, but it doesn't fit the bill. It looks similar, just like a bechor shoita. There's a concept of firstborn. He has an older sister, so he's not really the firstborn, but he is the firstborn boy. They called him a bechor shoita, but he doesn't really fall into the criteria to be a bechor, to be a firstborn, to get the double portion of the inheritance. But nevertheless, he's a bechor. He is the firstborn boy, but he doesn't fall into the rules of firstborn. Same thing as this hadas. It looks similar and it's close, but it's not the actual thing. So we use the same term, hadas shoita. All right, so that's that's basically where we got up to yesterday, and now we are up to Tanu Rabbanan, 4 lines from the bottom of the page.
I have a question.
Yes, Jeffrey.
Is it possible that the word tam here could refer to the fragrance, that the fragrance of the bark of the stem is the same as the fragrance of the fruit?
Maybe.
And it seems to me that would follow in the meaning of tam. And we use the leaves when they dry, they have a very nice fragrance, and we put them into Havdalah box,
right, the summon,
etc. Right, so we can use them all. Well, the other thing is also that this avos with an ayin, versus kalua. I think we have to look up other places that have these two words, because it says here that it's murkav, that the one leaf seems to be,
right, Reichiv, I think is the word. I don't know if it comes from the word Morkov.
you know, what one place says murkav and the other place says rochev. But anyhow, it comes from the idea of grafting. Right, when they talk about grafted plants, the murkav is the one that is grafted onto the stem that's in the ground. So it's more like I don't see it as looking like a braid so much as something that is on top of the other. And it does say also, but it's hard to know the imagery until we know what all those words are used for in other places.
So in the Chumash, it does mention the word sharsharos gavlos masei avos.
Correct, but that's with the clothing of the Kohen.
Well, the chains to the breastplate.
Yeah, and it has
Maasei avos sharsharos
gavlos.
by the Choshen.
Yeah.
Sharsharos gavlos masei avos.
They're holding it onto the ephod, but and it's shoulder pieces, but it's yeah. It could be called that because it's like a necklace, not only because it's braided. It has different pieces to it, so it hangs from the pieces. That's why, to me, I always think about a sharsheret in that case like a necklace almost. But we have to look up because I think there are a lot of other sub meanings to this. We have other roots in the Torah used to mean woven or that mean braided. I think beside this.
Well, kliya, and avos, right? These seem to be the two words used.
But avos could also mean wide, right? Can also mean wide.
Right. It doesn't seem that that's the translation here at all. But yeah, they're right.
Because so the other leaves of the chestnut are very wide, and then they get tapered. And we have chestnuts in New England and other places.
So Rashi says kaluahu, that it's not that it's wide.
Yeah. I didn't find the Rashi for that word.
Dulva.
Yeah. Yeah.
Eitz armoin, castanier, is some type of Aramaic, old French word. And then he says kaluahu avlein olav retzufen.
Castanier. It's the name of a tree. Castanier.
Castanier. Okay. So it's kaluahu avlein olav retzufen lechasis kol eitzoy. So the leaves are not constant to cover the entire
the stem.
The stem. So it sounds like they are overlapping, but they're but they're not kalua. They're overlapping on the sides, but it's not the top and the bottom. It seems like there's empty space that it's not overlapping.
So can
covering the.
So could the ayin bet of mean shading, like rather than being in a chain, could it mean something like shading?
So in other words, what's bothering you is that you know what a chestnut tree looks like, and you don't see the leaves really similar to a hadas where they're coming out of one stem and covering the entire area. You don't see that. So what does it mean? You're trying to understand how, maybe have a different understanding of what it means that it's braided and that it's avos. Yeah. I guess what we would need to do, in other words, you're really questioning the meaning here because of the practical, because you know what it looks like. What we need, I guess what we need to do is really look at the chestnut tree.
Correct. And there must be different varieties in different countries. But here's where it says more coven, you see?
Yeah, I saw the word merkavin, but I don't believe. I see. Again, I don't know so much about grafting, but I think the word merkav here is not the same word as grafting. It's from the word roichev, which maybe is connected to the word
It
grafting.
is. It's the same root.
When you graft, is one always on top of the other, riding on top? You can't do side by side grafting. It's always
Correct.
one on top.
Correct. Because
Really?
you have to the vessels, the phloem and the xylem have to connect. The vessels that carry the nutrients and the vessels that carry the water inside the plant have to connect.
So grafting would never be able to be done side by side. It would have to be one on top of the other. Okay, so then it's the same word. Okay, so then you're right. Then it's more covered. But the main point is that it's resting, that if it's covering over the one on top of it. In other words, that they should rest on the one on top of it. More kavim zelzeh.
But that's why two. That's why two is permissible with one. Because I've looked at some of the standards.
Wait. What did you just say? Two is permissible with one.
But that's why 2 leaves. Instead of 3 in one place, and 2 plus 1.
The one below it would be good enough as long as it's leaning on the ones above it. Right, as long as it's leaning on the one above it. Right. Okay. So the Rashi that mentions the word merkavim, so he just says that it needs to be braided and similar to a chain, that they should be riding one on top of the other, meaning the ones below are overlapping the ones above. That's the way I understood it. So it's not really connected to grafting, except for the fact that one is below and one is above, like you're saying. So it's riding on. I would use the root roichev, that it's riding on. It's more kavim. It's pulled on top of. It's riding. One is riding on the other. But okay, so that basically is this Gemara about the overlapping, the covering of the stem, and that's what the hadas is. And then we ended with this discussion about the hadas that's called the hadas shoita, and we'll have to look in Shulchan Aruch if there's any leniencies, because have to understand that there were times when it was really hard to get hadassim. So in Shulchan Aruch, it does bring a type of a case where they used to use 2 and 2, like there were hadassim, and they wanted that there were 2 above and 2 below, and it was different than our hadas. And it says that people used to use that as a hadas. They had no other choice. So we'll have to take a look in Shulchan Aruch about it, what it says. But this is the simple thing is you have 3 coming out of one juncture, and that's what's kosher. Now the Gemara is going to talk about a case we'll soon see on page 33a, where it talks about a hadas mitzri, a Egyptian hadas, and so on. So we'll get to that. Now the next Gemara is if the leaves fell off, and this is a of course, a common issue, especially because when you hold it, every time it bangs into something, and as it dries out over Sukkah, as the hadassim dry out, so it becomes more easy for the leaves to fall off. You don't have this by a lulav. The leaves of the lulav don't normally fall off, but by a hadassim, and probably worse by the aravais. We'll have to see what the laws are by aravais, but by hadassim, it does happen that the leaves fall off. Tanu Rabbanan, so the rabbis taught in the Brisa, we are 4 lines up from the bottom of page 32b. 32b, 4 lines up from the bottom. Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught in a brisa. Nashru roiv olav. If the majority of the leaves of the hadas fell off. Vinishtairu by miut, in a few were left. A minority was left. Nishtayr was left over on it. A minority, a miut, the minority was left over on the hadas. Kosher, it is going to be kosher. Uvelvad shetehei avoisai kayemes, as long as the braiding is still there. So now what does that mean? The majority has fallen off. Well, each one has 3 leaves. So that means 2. Every juncture has 3 leaves. That means 2 leaves on each juncture have fallen off. The majority have fallen off. It's going to be kosher as long as avoisai, the braid, is still there. Now the Gemara says, "Ha gufa kasha." This itself is a question. Amrit nashu roiv olav kosher. You just said that if the majority fell off, it's kosher. V'hadar tani, and then you taught of as long as the braid is still there. But kivan denatri lahu trey, if two have fallen off, how is it possible that you're going to have the braid type of look? You don't have three in one juncture to be braided, and they're not overlapping, at least on the horizontal way. The ones to the right and ones to the left are not there to overlap and make it look like a braid. So how are you going to have that? So the Gemara answers, Amar Abaye. Abaye says, Mishkachas law, it's possible. It's possible. Now we turn the page to 33a. Ba'asa mitzrah. It's possible with an Egyptian hadas. Asa is the Hebrew word for the Aramaic word for hadas, asa. And a hadas of mitzrah of Egypt. The ones in Egypt, it's possible that or mitzrah could mean that it's there are two meanings of mitzrah, I should say. One is that it's Egypt, it's from the word mitzrayim, but there is another meaning of mitzrah. The other meaning of mitzrah means the meitzar. It's used as a it grows by the walls of the field. So the end of the field. This is the border. It grows by the border of the field, and therefore, so what's unique about it? The kaimi shiva b'chad kino. It grows 7 leaves on every juncture, and so what would happen here? You have 7 leaves, and the majority of the leaves have fallen off. You still have 3 left. The chinatri arba pashalu talasa. If 4 fall off, now you have 3 left. Pashalu talasa. Chinatri arba. When 4 fall off, pashalu talasa, you have 3 left, and so what happens is that you now have a typical hadas. You had a hadas mitzrah, this unique type of hadas that's either from Egypt or it's the hadas that grows on the border, the edge of the field, and somehow because it has a lot of empty space, it somehow grows much better, and it gets 7 leaves on every juncture. Somehow it has more space to shine. So the Gemara says that in this scenario, even a majority fall off, it's still going to be kosher. Why? Because you're still going to have the braid type of look to it, because it has 3. And even though the majority fell off, we don't need those. Now, what ends up happening is, okay, I'll finish the Gemara. I'll tell you something interesting. So Abaye says, Amar Abaye says, Shmamina, we hear from this a very interesting halacha then, that Hai Asa Mitzra'ah Kosher Lo Hishana. This Asa Mitzra'ah, this type of hadas, is kosher for Hoshana. And Hoshana is the term the Gemara uses whenever it says to do the mitzvah of lulav. It uses the word Hoshana. It's kosher for Hoshana. Which fits. Hoshana means save us, right? And that's part of the prayer of Hoshanos. We're asking Hashem to save us, which fits with what we've talked about a while back, that the arba minim, the 4 species, are meant to ask Hashem, to beg Hashem for blessings. They're our way of appeasing Hashem or asking Hashem, and so that's what in other words, the inyan of the we had an insight a while back that mitzvah haba ba'avera, the concept of where does the mitzvah haba ba'avera become a problem? When does it become a problem? anything that's bala ratzos, only on mitzvahs. Where is it a problem to do a mitzvah with something that's stolen? It's only on mitzvahs that are bala ratzos, that are coming to ask Hashem for things. Other mitzvahs that aren't part of asking Hashem for things, it's not a problem. This was one understanding in the Ritva. And so one of the cases was lulav. So we see that the arba minim, they're bala ratzos. That's why it seems like the Gemara would call it hoshana. We call Hishanis only the Aravis when you bang the Hishanis down. We call those the Hishanis. But really in the Gemara, it uses the term Hishana, which just fits with this idea. Again, even if you don't learn that pshat, but the concept is correct that the Arba Minim are meant for Laratzis. Now you don't have to learn that pshat that the mitzvah babavera only applies in these cases, but the fact that it says that these cases are cases of balaratzos, that these are cases of balaratzos, that seems to be a accepted thing. So that means that we don't always think about it, that the arba minim are balar, that there's like a specific meaning in them, that we're being meratza Hashem, that he should not give us, that he shouldn't make us suffer from hurricanes or evil winds, right? So ask Hashem for rain, proper rain, or the brachas that we're supposed to get from the Arba Minim. We are being meratza Hashem, appeasing Hashem, or asking Hashem for our needs. So anyway, they're called Haisha. So here the Gemara says the Azam Mitzrah is kosher for Haishana, kosher for the Arba Minim. And the Gemara says, Pshita. Why not? Why shouldn't it be? Isn't that obvious? Pshita, it's obvious. The Gemara says, no, Ma'u the Tema Hoil Isle Shem Levi. Since the Asa Mitzrah, this Hadas, that's called a Hadas Mitzrah, has a added name. It has an additional name that's added to it, and because of that, that might mean that it's not the regular species that we need for hadassim. So I would think loy miskasher. I would have thought to say that because it has this extra name to it, not called a regular hadas, it's called a hadas mitzrah. So loy miskasher, it shouldn't be kosher because it's considered a different species. When you add the name to something, if it's not called, it doesn't fall into the regular category. So I would say that it's not kosher. And on this, the Gemara says, Kamash Malon comes and lets us hear that it is kosher. So the Gemara says, maybe that's a good point. Maybe it's true. It has an extra name. Maybe you can't use the hadas mitzrah. Once it has that extra name, it's not the regular, it's not a hadas. It's hadas mitzrah. It's not a hadas. The Gemara says, yeah, except the fact that the Torah doesn't tell you hadas. If the Torah told you to use a hadas, then you would need it to be only a hadas. Here the Torah says, anaf eitz avos. Eitz avos amrachman. Mikol makan. Torah says eitz avos. There's a reason. You know why? The reason why the Torah says eitz avos? Because it doesn't only have to be a hadas. To be a hadas mitzvah is also kosher. As long as it fits that category of eitz avos, it fits that category. It's basically including these other types of hadassim that are, as long as they fall into the category of eitz avos, it would be allowed. Mikol makan. That's what the Torah says, that any type should be okay. Mikol makan. So that's the Gemara's conclusion about this hadas mitzvah. Now, what I was going to mention is it's interesting because according to halacha, if you have a regular hadas and the leaves fall off, so what's the halacha? If it's you still have majority left of the leaves, it's fine. It's no problem, right? You can have, let's say, one leaf fall off on every one, no problem for sure. It's kosher. You have roiv. It's not a problem. You have a majority. Here, what does the Gemara say? Gemara says that you have 7. You start with 7. Majority fell off. 4 fall off. As long as you have 3 left, it's kosher. Question is, what about if 5 fall off? 5 fall off, then it would be similar to what we have when there's 1 falls off and there's 2 left. You still have majority, and it's not a problem. Now, this, it doesn't work that way. For the hadas that started off with 7, and you lost the majority, there you actually need 3 to stay on it. Because when you have 3 and you lose 1, you still have majority. The rule is that we can go by Roy, we could say that you have majority left, considered as if they're all there. But here you don't have that claim. Here you lost 4, it's fine, because you have 3 left, and it's obvious. But if you start with 7, you have only 2 left. So what are you going to say? It's not proper hadas. But can you say I have majority? At least I have majority of leaves. You can't say that because it started over 7. You only have 2 left, so it's not majority. You don't have that ability to rely on that to have such a leniency, so to speak, to be able to say that I have the majority. It's good rubai kukula. The majority is like I have all of them. You can't say that. So because you lost the majority, it needs to be the actual amount you need to have. You need to have always. It has to be overlapping, and it has to be considered like a braid. And if you miss that, it's not going to be it's not going to be kosher. Okay. So that's the law about a hadas mitzvah. Tano Rabbanan, the rabbis taught in the Brisa. Yavshu Roiv Olav. The majority of the leaves have dried up. V'nisharu by shloisha badei yolin lachen. But you have 3 leaves that that are fresh. In other words, 3 leaves on each of the 3 hadassim. So the Rashi here says shloisha badin uvachol badu bad shloisha olin lachen. 3 stems. You have 3 branches, and shloisha bade alin lachin. And each of these branches has shloisha alin lachin. You have 3 leaves that are fresh, and because less than 3, if it didn't have 3, it won't be called aves. They won't be called that it's braided. So you need to have the 3 in order for it to be braided, and so it says that if the majority are dried up, and all you have are these shloisha bade alin lachen, 3 branches, the 3 myrtles. So you have 3 leaves on each of them that are fresh, and the rest are not fresh. They're dried out. Kosher is kosher. But if you have less than that, so it won't be considered avos, it'll be puzzle. Now, Vamer Rav Chizda says, Uberoish kol echad v'yechad. These 3 have to be on the top. They have to be on the top because if they weren't on the top, it's not considered beautiful. Why? Because a person's eyes, they first see the top of the hadassim. That's what sticks out. And one of the laws about the arba minim is that it's not necessarily dependent on what it actually has as much as it's dependent on how it looks. And if it looks kosher, then it's kosher. And so the hadas that has on the top of it these 3 fresh leaves, that would be considered good enough. If the leaves are in the middle, that would be a problem, or on the bottom, because then it's not the first thing. It's not the thing that catches the eye. Because it doesn't catch the eye, then it would look to you like these are dried out. And if it's dried out, it's going to be invalid. So what is the measurement for dried out? So the measurement for dried out seems to be 2 points. One is about if it crumbles when you put pressure from your fingernail on it, and the other is dried out if it has no more color to it, no more green color to it. But so this is the law of dried out if it's yavshu roiv olav, the majority of dried out. Now comes the Gemara and says niktam roisha, the top has been clipped, and our Mishnah said that it's invalid, puzzle. Tani ula barchinana niktam roisha. What happens if the top was clipped? But also by tomorrow, and literally it means a date grew on it, and which basically means like a little berry or something grew on it. So niktam roisha, but also by tomorrow. So this little fruit, it looks like a little date. So it uses the word date. So the date grew on it. Kosher, it is considered kosher because by the fact that it grew on it a date, so it makes it as if you don't see that it was clipped, and that makes it considered kosher. Boy, Reb Yirmiyah. Reb Yirmiyah asks a question. Niktam roisha me'erev Yom Tov, if the top was clipped from before Yom Tov, in other words, you tied the lulav together, and after it was tied together, the top of the hadas got clipped off. We also by tomorrow be Yom Tov, and on Yom Tov, what we're calling a date, which means a little berry grew on it. Mahu, what is the din? Yesh dichoy etzel mitzvahs oiloi. This is a big question. Is there a concept of dichoy? Dichoy means once it's been pushed off, does that make it permanently pushed off? Meaning, even though after it got pushed off, it's now going to be eligible for the mitzvah because the problem is no longer a problem. But once it already was said, you can't be brought as a sacrifice, no longer it's acceptable as a sacrifice. In other words, this law, dichoy, is mentioned by sacrifices. Of course, here we're not using it for a sacrifice. Here we're using it for the hadasim, where they initially were invalid because the top was clipped off, but then it grew a little stem. Now, this is not that surprising because the hadasim, I mean, you keep it in water, you keep your lulav in water, and so it's possible that it'll grow a little berry on the top. So the question is, when Yom Tov arrived, it was invalid. It was pushed off. The Yom Tov arrives. Is this lulav with the hadassim and arav? Is this kosher? No, it's not kosher. Why isn't it kosher? Because the top is clipped. Top is clipped. The Mishnah said it's invalid. Again, we'll have to discuss about the final halacha about the top being clipped. But here, the Mishnah says it's invalid, and Yom Tov arrived. It's invalid. Now on Yom Tov, first day Yom Tov comes around, morning. All of a sudden, there seems to be a little growth over there. It doesn't look like it's clipped anymore. It doesn't look clipped. So maybe you could now use it. On the other hand, the thing is that, no, we already said it's invalid. Once you push it off, maybe the law is that it's temporarily invalid, makes it invalid forever. Just like a carbon. What happens by a carbon? A carbon, there was something, Rashi over here brings about a carbon. Maybe I'll read it inside. Let me read it, Rashi, inside. 33a, we're on 33a and Rashi, about 12 lines from the top. It says, Yesh dichoy etzel mitzvahs. Do we say dichoy by mitzvahs? Dichoy means pushed aside. We say pushed aside by mitzvahs. Koloimar, so to say. Neheges Thurs dichoy etzel mitzvahs kashem sheneheges etzel karbonos. Do we follow? Do we accustom the rule of dichoy? The rule of dichoy by mitzvah is similar to how we follow it with regard to karbonos. We apply it to karbonos. We apply it to mitzvahs similar to the way we apply it to sacrifices. That if it was eligible, and then it got pushed aside, once it was slaughtered, Amrinon Yidcha, we say no, it's pushed aside. So we say it gets pushed aside. The Sulai Hadar Chazi, it's not going to be fit anymore. Hachanami here also. Once it became invalid, unusable, pushed aside, once the clip was clipped, Sulai Hadar Mechse be Aliyas Tomorrow. We no longer say that it's no longer fit when the date grows on it. Here we're not getting into exactly the fact that it was fit and it wasn't fit. Because this is a little problematic, because here the lulav was never fit in the first place. So Rashi is bothered with a question here. What happens is, and by karbonos, the law is that there's a difference between something that was once fit, then it got pushed aside because it's no longer valid. And then the question is, now it's fit again. Now it actually works. Do we say, oh, it was pushed aside once, we have to keep it pushed aside? What about in a case where it never was fit in the first place, and then it got pushed aside, and now it's fit? That might be different because it never really was fit in the first place. If it became invalid, so then we say, oh, it became invalid, we keep it invalid. But this was never in the first place. It wasn't really valid in the first place. Now it became valid, so it's not pushed aside. Maybe now should be more lenient. Anyway, we're not getting into that. Rashi says here, we're not getting into the fact that it maybe was never fit in the first place. So maybe that would play a role and end up being different. No, the Gemara is comparing it and just wondering what would be the halacha. Again, the point is that this is a case where the lulav was invalid when Yom Tov arrived. So it was never really fit, because before Yom Tov, you can't shake the lulav. There's no mitzvah. And when Yom Tov arrived, it was invalid. So it was never really valid yet. And on Yom Tov, it became valid. Anyway, the point is that it could be dichoy. And the Gemara is thinking that maybe we're going to say that once it was invalid, you can't use it. Even though now it should be kosher, but no, once it's pushed aside, we push it aside maybe forever. So the Gemara says, the tifshite, so can't you see an answer to this question? Find an answer. Tifshite lay, answer it. May haditnan, from this that it learned, that it teaches in a Mishnah, that where a person slaughtered and he slaughtered a bird or one of the a wild animal, not a domesticated animal. So there's a mitzvah of kisoi hadam. There's a mitzvah to cover the blood. So it says kisohu. If he covered the blood, you're supposed to put some sand or earth on top of the blood. And so if he covered it, binis gala, and then somehow the earth that you put on top of it, or the sand you put on top of it, if it became uncovered, the scala became revealed, became uncovered, pater milachasos. You don't have to cover it anymore, because once you fulfilled the mitzvah, you're not obligated. You fulfilled it. You covered it. But kisohu haruach. However, if the wind blew the dust, the earth or the sand on top of the earth, blew the sand on top of the blood, then and it got revealed, got uncovered. chayev lechasos, you would be obligated to go and cover it. V'yamar Rabba bar Bachana Rabbi Yochanan. Rabba bar Bachana says in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Lo shanu elo shechazar v'neskala. This law that if the wind had covered it, meaning the wind had blown this sand, earth to cover the blood in the first place, that you will have to go and recover it. It's only talking about a case where the wind blew it off, and now you have a mitzvah to cover it. But if the wind, if it was done by the wind in the first place, it never got uncovered. The wind pushed the earth on top of the blood, and it stayed there. Pater milachasos, you would be exempt from covering it. You're not obligated to go and uncover it and put on your own. No, the wind covered it. You're not obligated to go and cover it. If the wind blew off what was covered, then then you got to go. And we asked on this, Ki chazar v'nesgala amay chayv l'chasos. If it got uncovered, why would you be obligated to go and cover it? Since it was pushed off already, because once the wind covered it, you were exempt. So you should be totally exempt. It's pushed off. You shouldn't be obligated anymore. B'yamar Rav Papa, and Rav Papa says, Zoisei meres, here we see, ein dichoy etzel mitzvahs. We see here that there is no concept of being pushed off by a mitzvah. And therefore, the same point you could apply to our Gemara, that even though it was pushed off and the hadas was invalid, but nevertheless, now that it becomes valid, it should be okay. We should have an answer to our problem. So that is what the Gemara is thinking. And we are going to stop here. Sei gesund, everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you.